I'm not going to waste your time. The answer to the question of the title of this video is no, for almost everyone. At least if you value your mind over your heart, because this is a compromised device. It is an aggressively first generation device in a way that we have not seen Apple make these kind of compromises in a long time. And yet, if you allow your heart to take over, there's something to the thinness, the feel in the hand, the aesthetic of this iPhone Air. This really, it's not sold me, but it has really drawn me in a way that, I'll be honest, I've been missing from iPhones for a long time. If you've seen iPhone Air videos from content creators over the last week or so, you'll see a very specific perspective. It's cool, except that I want my ultra wide,
and my telephoto, and my ProRes, and my Apple Log. And the battery life is okay, I guess.
Every content creator is going to give you a different answer to how it meets their needs. For me, I'm a weirdo. I'm a guy who carries around 2 phones every day. I'm also someone who actually doesn't shoot that much on my phone anymore. I actually use real cameras for the most part now. The more I use the iPhone Air, the more I really understand the appeal. It has been many years since there was an iPhone that I actually cared about. The iPhone 4 was an incredible design. The iPhone 6 was really revolutionary for the time. The iPhone 10 changed the way that the iPhone works for the next decade. But to me, the iPhone Air deserves to be in that conversation. Except this is the worst one. It's hard to tell the story of the iPhone Air without discussing its many, many compromises. So the big one for me, and I think a lot of people, is the camera. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a perfectly reasonable camera. So you're looking at the only rear-facing camera right now, and it is perfectly acceptable. So for 80% of the photos and videos I take, it looks great. So this is the same lens and sensor from the iPhone 17. Compared to the Pro though, this is missing a lot. So not only is that a smaller sensor, but it also does not have any 4K 120 support. It will not support any kind of ProRes or log. Because you don't have the ultra-wide camera, you also don't have a macro mode. Now, the telephoto is actually probably the thing that I miss the least. I mean, you can zoom in on this lens and it's actually not too bad at 2, 3, even 4x, but there's no replacement for distance. If I want a wide shot, I gotta step back because there's nothing else that you can do. And to be entirely frank with you, that feels like a compromise too far. I'm fine not having all the pro features, but not having an ultra wide, I can't think of another phone above like $100 that doesn't have an ultra wide except the iPhone 16e. You can get away with it. Again, for 80% of the photos and videos, I have no complaints. But those times when you really want to zoom in, the times when you really want to get an ultra wide shot, those are important. And I think that that's a huge misstep on the iPhone Air, especially when you compare it to something like the Galaxy S25 Edge. I don't fully understand some of the compromises that Apple made with the Air because yes, this is ever so slightly thinner than the Edge. Yes, this is a smaller footprint. So this is a 6.5 inch display as opposed to 6.7, I believe, on the S25 Edge, and that is significant. Now, I understand the idea that Apple are trying to fit as much of the phone itself into the camera plateau as possible. And if you look at the iFixit teardown, which they did a phenomenal job of, you can see that while not everything fits up there, it is really impressive. Like, there's no doubt that Apple squeezed every square millimeter out of this phone. But I think no ultra wide, that by itself, when this phone is $200 more expensive than the standard phone, I think that's going to be really difficult to swallow for most people. I will say having such a high quality front-facing camera does help some of the deficiencies of the iPhone Air's single rear camera. So we can get examples of it right now, and I'll say it's really nice. So there's a couple things they improved here. First and foremost, they've improved the sensor. So not only is it square, which means you can shoot in both portrait as well as landscape orientations. It will crop it however you want it. But on top of that, it's just a much larger lens and sensor, which means that you actually get high quality results. I mean, obviously I've got a nice background here and some nice sunlight on me, but I actually think that this camera is good enough as a creator, you can actually get away with it. And it is the widest angle sensor on the phone, which means that you can kind of get away with it as a ultra wide. I will say that having this nicer front-facing camera on the Air does go a fairly long way toward making it a lot more useful for me. I think everyone can appreciate a better front-facing camera, and Apple knocked it out of the park on this one. Like, this is hands down the best front-facing experience on any phone you can get. Look at this, we've actually got depth of field on a front-facing camera. Like, what? I'm probably not alone in assuming that there would be some durability concerns with the iPhone Air. However, so far I've been pleasantly surprised. So I have not treated this phone kindly. I've been leaving it face down on tables, putting it in the back of airline seat pockets, like using it like I would any other phone. I've had no problems. Now, of course, if you are concerned, you can take a look at channel sponsor Dbrand, and there are very many items that will help to protect your phone. So I did immediately put on a Prism 2.0 screen protector, but if you want the ultimate protection, the tank. At first, I thought that the tank would be a little bit over the top for a thin phone like the Air. I'll say one of the advantages of the Air in that because it is so thin, even if you put on a pretty serious case like the tank, it only makes it roughly as thick as a regular smartphone. So if you want the utmost in protection, definitely be sure to go check out dbrand.com/AustinEvans, where you get still 42% off when you bundle the Prism screen protector with the actual case itself, whether it be the tank or something like the Ghost. Thank you very much to Dbrand for sponsoring this video. Based on some of the durability testing I've seen, I am not concerned about the Air. I mean, if you look at how much it takes to actually bend this thing and actually break it, I have no worries about the long-term durability of the Air. Now, we'll see how it goes over time, but at least that is one thing that thinness does not seem to have compromised. What it has compromised, though, without a shadow of a doubt, is battery. Like everyone, when Apple announced a $100 MagSafe battery specifically for the Air at the keynote, it felt like red flag central. This is, I think, going to depend on your usage, as always, because to me, the battery is actually okay. It's not too much different than something like the 16 Pro that I was previously using. In a vacuum, that's not bad. It really isn't, because this phone is properly thin, and the fact that you can pretty much get through a full day of usage is great. However, that is in a vacuum. If you compare this to something like the standard iPhone 17, or especially the Pro models this year, you're going to get a fairly noticeable bump, especially on the Pro and the Pro Max. You're looking at something like 2 days in a lot of cases. It's really gonna come down to what kind of compromises that you're okay with. It is perfectly acceptable for me. I think it's going to be okay for most people, but if you're a heavy user, you're gonna probably struggle, especially because, of course, this is testing the phone brand new. Give it a year or two of degradation, and that might start to get a little bit more marginal. But I will say that out of all the concerns I had about the iPhone Air going into it, battery is fairly low down on my list. I really want to love the iPhone Air. It is the most exciting iPhone design they have brought out in years, and it feels phenomenal in the hand. I think that there's a lot of specs and speeds and feeds, and I think there's a very real argument to be like, hey, why did they make so many compromises just to make it a little bit thinner? But when you use this phone, I think it's quickly apparent that this feels like the right size. I really like using this hardware. Much like I really like when the sun goes behind the cloud and it gets dark. But there are a lot of compromises to get to this design, and I'm not convinced that those are worth it. So there's the little stuff like no millimeter wave 5G. I personally don't really mind, but there's actually, I feel silly to say this, but one of the biggest compromises with this phone is the fact that it only has a single mono speaker. So there's a speaker up top, which is admittedly relatively loud, but it's a little bit tinny, and there's no stereo speaker whatsoever. To me, that is crazy. It feels like the classic decision you would make as a compromise on a first generation device. I don't want to say that this is a flawed device, even though it is. It's clear that there was a real level of design that went into this, right? Like, this feels like the first phone in a while that was not designed on a spreadsheet. But when you put the compromises together, they're pretty significant. And this thing is $200 more expensive than the regular iPhone 17. It's only $100 less expensive than the Pro, which I will say the Pro is hideously ugly this year, but if you don't care, you can put it in a case or something, you can get far better cameras, you're going to get a much more durable build, you can get a lot more battery life. I mean, you're just gonna get so many things that I think are impactful to people that it's like, why would you spend almost the same amount of money for a lot less? But the Air is something special. This feels like a phone that, while I don't think they've gotten the first generation right, when they cook on another generation or two, I think that this is going to be the phone of the future. This really, I think, is going to dictate the next several years of iPhone design. It's really tough because I want to just say this is such an obvious no-brainer, because that's the way I feel about it. But it's the battle between the head and the heart. This makes me feel something when I pick it up. The titanium side rails, I'm not usually a fan of gloss, but it works so well on this phone. The performance, while yes, you're technically losing a little bit of GPU compared to the Pro, And realistically, you're missing the vapor chamber, which means that, yeah, it does get a little bit warm. It's still better, even in benchmarks, than something like a last generation iPhone. So it's not a huge concern. It's so close to being a phone that I could actually recommend. Ultimately, I really think it comes down to this. Are you willing to make compromises on two major areas? Battery life, which is just okay, and a camera, which is fine 80% of the time and going to drive you crazy the other 20% when you wish it had some of the telephoto reach or some of the ultra wide. If you can say yes to both those questions, then congratulations, the iPhone Air is kind of worth it. Unfortunately, battery, camera tend to be some of the more important parts of a phone. And I think for almost everyone, this is a phone that you should skip this year. If you really want the Air, I would just wait until next year. It's going to likely have some major improvements when it comes to battery life and like millimeter wave 5G, and hopefully find a way to put another speaker in it. Like, this is just such a first generation device in a way that Apple's not shipped in a while. I'm glad they've done it because it is a really impressive device, but also it's a really flawed one at that. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that ding-a-ling button. And don't forget to check out Dbranded at the link in the description if you want to get yourself a brand new Prism screen protector or a case for your shiny new phone. Well, make sure you keep it shiny.